So I'm going to start by giving just a little bit of just a kind of a legislative primer, so that you kind of know how the Florida legislature works, and then our role then as we get into it. The Florida legislature has a House of Representatives and a Senate, just like we do federally. There's other states that have just kind of a unicameral body. There's other states that are, called like an assembly. We're a House of Representatives and a Senate. Our Florida Senate has 40 members. They serve a 4-year term. They also are term limited. All legislators are term limited. We adopted that in the early 90s into our Constitution. So they're an 8-year term. So they get, an 8-year term limit. So they get essentially 2 terms. So they run for that re-election really only once. There's a little bit of a quirk when they do reapportionment and based on even number and odd number districts so that they're not all up at the same time. Some of them actually get a 10-year term. So like Senator Bradley, good friend of mine from up in Northeast Florida, she actually, she got elected in 2020, but will not be termed out until 2030. And she's not on the ballot for now for 2024. She'll be on the ballot in 2026 and then get that 4-year term, which is why she would go to 2030. The Florida House of Representatives has 120 members, and they are elected to 2-year terms, and they are allowed to serve 8 years as well. So they usually run for that re-election like 4 times to be able to get their terms in. They can always leave, come back, but consecutively, we term limited everybody to 8 years. They all get paid the same amount of money. Doesn't matter if you were just elected or if you've been there, you're 8 years in the House and you go to the Senate 8 years and you've been in the legislature 16 years. They all get paid just a little bit over $29,000 a year. So it's considered in the state of Florida a part-time elected office. The staff makes much more than they do. They're not like legislators that are like, say, in the state of California, where they are considered full-time elected officials. They all get paid, they start a little north of $80,000. So that's their job. In Florida, we have what's called, a citizens legislature. So the idea being, when we were in statehood and they set this up, the idea being, well, we're going to be bringing in some school teachers that'll know, because they're coming from the classroom all the time. They're going to just be here to help us understand education. And we're going to bring in the pharmacist, and we're going to bring in some lawyers and doctors. And so it's a state that's supposed to be made up, or our state legislature, of, agriculture, farmers, that are coming in and being that citizens legislature. The problem with that is, like I started off by saying, that you guys are the subject matter experts. They are not subject matter experts on anything other than really what their job is. So, like from this area, Senator Ingoglia, who just got elected he was in the House and then just got elected to the Senate 2 years ago. He's a developer and also a professional poker player, literally. So he knows, development, real estate, that kind of thing, but he is not, he's not going to know native plants at all. He's not going to know they don't know anything other than what their job is. So they are listening to the advocates such as you and me, and they really heavily rely on staff. So a lot of what our work is together, and we're going to talk about how we do that, is to educate staff and provide them with information so that they can educate these legislators who really rely, you look at it as, they're just listening to lobbyists and doing whatever they say. A lot of it is simply because they do not know. So they need information. We're the 3rd largest state in the country. We have a well over now $100 billion budget. They are supposed to be putting together that budget, and they need to know what the priorities are. And again, they don't know. So they meet every in the even number years. Session is in January. So this is something that's a little quirky with how things work in the state of Florida. They only meet for 60 days. So there's committee meetings. So they'll start with committee meetings interim committee meetings in those years where there's a non-election year. They'll start like in August, start having committee meetings, start hearing bills, those kinds of things. But then they're only in session. So the only time they can go on the floor, they can vote on anything other than if the governor calls them into a special session, or they can call themselves into a special session by a supermajority vote of each chamber. But they go in even number years in January, and they end in March. So that's why in 2024, even number year, we just got done with our session March 8th. In the odd number years, like 2025, they don't go in until March. They go March to May. The reason for that, I think publicly, when they came up with that was, well, you know, we need to get done with the budget. And so that's the only thing that they are constitutionally required to do. So it is, we want to make sure that we get the budget done and then get out of here. I think a lot of it is the reason why they did it in those interesting odd and even number years that way is because they cannot raise money. They cannot accept, they cannot ask for, they cannot raise any kind of money while they're in session. So if in an even number year, like 2024, when there's an election that's going to be in November, and if you start backing up that calendar, so primaries are going to be like in August, if they are not done with that budget and get it agreed to and all done, and they end up going in, extending sessions, special sessions, they go into, well into they cannot raise any money, and now they're getting into the summer, and they were like, you know what, that's not a good idea for us. We want to get done in those election years so we're done in March. So if we do extend a little bit, we're still done, let's say, in May, April, May, and we can get out and raise money. But so that when Gene mentioned we just got done with a session in 2024, because we're in that every other year, it's going to be where we literally have, a full 12 months before the next session starts instead of the 10 months that we would, regularly. So there won't be any legislative committee meetings. They won't do any of that unless they're called into a special session. There was a rumor that the governor was going to call them into a special session to deal with immigration, I think, and I'm not trying to be political. This is not political. I don't care what your politics are, but I'm just letting you know how it is. I feel like that they were a little disappointed that there weren't more like Haitian immigrants that they needed to deal with or something, and so they decided we need to go and pass like a Texas-style immigration law. And maybe that's something they need to do, but he wanted to do that, and then also the legislature can put amendments on the ballot, amendments for our Constitution, like when you go to vote and you go through all of the local, state, local offices, state offices, federal offices, and then you see, all of the county ordinance portion of the ballot, and then you also see all the constitutional amendments on there. The way they get on there is mainly two ways. There's a third way that happens every 20 years. The Constitution Revision Commission gets together every 20 years. They're appointed, and they can put things on the ballot. But typically, they have to go through a signature process. So that would be if all of us decided, the legislature isn't dealing with something that we want dealt with, then we go out and we have to collect a lot of signatures. That's a whole thing that we won't get into. You then take those signatures. You have to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has to make sure that the language, that they check, first of all, that all the signatures are correct. Then they also, and that was done properly. Then they also check the language to make sure that it's single subject, not going to be confusing to the voters, all of that. Then it can go onto the ballot. The other way is for the legislature. The legislature can pass what's called a resolution that has to pass both chambers by 2/3 of a vote, so not just a simple majority, passed by 2/3, bypasses going to the governor like a normal bill would go to, because the thought being, we've already passed it by 2/3, so even if the governor vetoed it, we have enough to override the veto, so they just skip that process altogether, and it goes directly to the ballot. It also skips the Supreme Court process, so the legislature can also put things on the ballot. Now, once it's on the ballot, they both have to pass now by 60% of the vote, 60% plus one, but the thought, there's been some discussion that, they thought, what, we're going to put something, we're going to deal with immigration, and then we're also going to pass some amendments that are also going to go on the ballot that might, and they're, might make things a little bit more muddy for the voter, I think. This is my own thought, because the two amendments would deal with abortion and with legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes, which, as you know, that already happened and is on the ballot because of the first way, the voters saying we want these on the ballot. So, it's hard to get 60%. I mean, we can't get a majority of the people to agree that today's Monday, oftentimes. But that's the way that they could get this on the ballot. It could be a little confusing. The voters say, well, am I voting? What am I doing? And then all of a sudden, oh, but you didn't get 60%. So, but I was talking to a senator today who was with the Senate President and with the Speaker of the House over the weekend and said they are not interested in having a special session because it also doesn't, there's a lot of politics involved, and the thought being, if we call a special session for, let's call it more like cultural type issues, and we're not doing anything on pocketbook issues like insurance rates, where we pay 4 times more than anybody else, that's not going to play real well in come the ballot. So I don't think that's going to happen. So the next time we would go into session would be November. They will have the election. Then within the way our Constitution works, within 10 days of that, they have to have an organizational session. So they all go up, they all get sworn in, and then they start the process of then organizing themselves, and they choose, this is going to be the speaker, this is going to be the president, and then they decide these are the committees you're now going to serve on. That usually kind of comes out in like December, and then they will start holding what's called interim committee meetings in January. They will have one in January, one in usually two in February because they deal with the budget, and then immediately they'll start into March. So we'll start seeing bills again getting filed in after the November election, after they all get sworn in. So we're in this period of time where we need to be doing our organizing and our work. And this is not hyperbole, this is the actual truth. You guys are the most important part of the process because you are what I consider not even the grassroots, but the grass tops. You guys have spheres of influences that are the grassroots that you always hear about. Oh, this is a grassroots effort. It is absolutely imperative that you guys are all staying engaged, that you know who everybody's address. If you put in, and I'm going to give you some websites, and might as well start with that right now. If you go to www.flsenate.gov, I always use the Senate site because it's a little bit easier I just think it's better than the House site, so I've already done that work for you. So the Senate site, a couple things you're going to need to know. Number one, and these bills that we're going to talk about, you can read more about them, but at the top left-hand corner of the website, when you log in, there's a box. It's already set for 2024. It's already pre-set up. If you wanted to look at something from years past, you could hit the drop down and pick another year. But for right now, it's 2024. When we talk about bill numbers, and you hear, like even tonight, but also when you get updates and you hear different things, you don't ever have to remember whether or not it's a House bill or a Senate bill. Because here's a little tip. All Senate bills are even number, always and forever. It's always going to be an even number. All House bills are odd number. So when you put in a bill number, the system's already going to know the HB and SB part based on the fact that you put in a 3 or a 4. So when you put in the bill number and then you hit go, you're going to get a bunch of information. You're going to be able to see, the summary. They now have this AI summary that's done for you. The thing I kind of think needs to be kind of fixed about that is the AI summary is just kind of the original bill, and then as the bill gets changed and amended, I think they need to tweak that, and I think they're working on that to update that. But you'll get a bill analysis. You can get the staff analysis. Every committee that it goes through, they're going to do a new staff analysis. You'll see based on dates, the latest things. So you can read, like if you see something that Gene and the policy committee sends out, and you think, what are they talking? What was that? You can go and look at this bill, and you can see all of it. You can see you can go to votes. You can see every bit of information you need. If you look at the last version, and again, it's by date. It's also lined up with in numeric order, with the last thing being the latest being the last. You can click on there and get the latest version of the bill. The other thing that's important to know about that page is up at the top right hand, it'll say, on the Senate side, it'll say, do you want to track this bill? And if you say, yes, I want to track that bill, I want to know what's going on with that bill, it will then give you updates based on whether or not you put in that you want it by text or by email. You will get a text or an email anytime anything happens. An amendment gets filed to that bill, it gets scheduled for a hearing, there's something that's changed, it passes, it goes to the governor, it's vetoed, any of that stuff, you'll get notified. And that's important, not just for now for these, but going forward. On the home page, before you put in your bill number, is another thing that I think is important, and it says find your legislator. So if you put in your street address, it's going to tell you who your senator is and who your House member is. Those are two that you need to know who they are, because it's very important, because they, as somebody that worked on staff, I will tell you, they listen. If they get more than like 10 emails on the same subject, and I wouldn't just cut and paste and blast it that way, but generally speaking, if that subject is, that there's concerns about it, House Bill 1637, if they get 10 emails on that, because not many people, you think, oh my God, people email and write and call. They don't. 10, it's a crisis. I mean, it's what's going on, what is this, we need to figure this out. Case in point, one of the bills that we dealt with this last year dealt with a preemption of plastics. And so right now, every 10 years, DEP has to do a study. It's only a study on plastic bags. Something we dealt with when fighting Publix and everything else. It's a whole other thing. But it deals with the impact of plastic bags. So they have to do it every 10 years. Well, there was a bill that was filed that, number one, got rid of the study. DEP, we don't have to study anything about plastics anymore. And then they also, it has a preemption. So years ago, when this study was put in, the state decided, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to put a stop on local governments passing any kind of ordinance regarding plastic bags, because we're going to do a study. So the thought was, so if DP is going to do a study, maybe then this will be a statewide thing. Because, excuse me, Publix had said, when I met with the Publix lobbyist, they said, look, we don't care, Retail Federation, Publix, we don't care what the policy is. It could be no plastic bags, it's fine, as long as it's statewide. What we don't want is that this Publix on this side of the street in Brooksville, Brooksville has said no plastic bags. And you get down with cities that literally are just like in South Florida, where it's just a few condos and you're in another city. And in this city, they say you're allowed to have plastic bags. It's going to confuse the customers. They don't know. They've rushed into this Publix, and oh no, now they're going to have to pay a deposit. They didn't bring their bags with them, all of these things. So they wanted it to be statewide. So the state said, all right, we're going to study this, but in the meantime, we're putting in this preemption. Local governments, because there were several local governments that were starting to pass no plastic bags, we're preempting plastic bag ordinances. Well, this bill this year would have, got rid of the state study. We're not going to have any state study, but it would have expanded the preemption. It would have said no plastic bags, no styrofoam, no plastic bottles, no straws, all kinds of stuff. So we ended up working in a coalition, us, the Springs Council, and others, and we were like, well, this bill is going to this committee, and we've got to put a stop to this. So we put out hundreds, if not thousands of emails, went out, and in the Senate, we're like, we can stop this in this committee, because there's only, I think it was 8 members of this committee. So we only need 4 votes, and if there's 4 votes, then it dies by a tie vote, means it doesn't pass. So we can, and there's 3 Democrats, one about, we don't really, we can win in this committee. So we started sending a ton of emails and letters to Senator Bradley, who I mentioned before, in Northeast Florida, one of the most rural districts. It's more prisons and cows than anything else in that district. And the message was, this is going to impact springs, and there are a lot of springs and a lot of state parks in that area. So she got with me and said, well, tell me about this. This seems horrible. I'm getting blown up. What's going on? And I said, oh, well, it is horrible. This is what's happening. So she went to the bill sponsor and said, I'm out. I can't vote for this. And he said, well, wait, what? So then they got us all together. They weren't going to meet with us or do anything. And it came down to where the 4 votes were strong. We're not changing our mind. And so he ended up having to what's called TP the bill, which is temporarily pass the bill. And it means it's not going to be taken up in that committee. If it's not taken up in the next committee, it automatically dies. And so we killed the bill, all because of all of the emails and calls that went in that stirred up the fact that this preemption would undo a lot of protections that we have around the springs. So now we've gotten her where she's calling and saying, why do we even allow plastics in state parks? Why can't vendors say, if you're going to be selling, we're going to let you be the vendor of choice in our state park. It's not going to be styrofoam containers or whatever. There's other alternatives. So now she's asking those questions. So we're now looking at those kinds of things to be able to expand. So that is the power that you guys have that I don't think you guys really realize. A lot of times the public is like, well, what did the legislature, they're doing something to us. What are they doing? What did they do? And you guys really can shake it up, and it doesn't mean you have to go to Tallahassee and, march and picket, which, if you want to come to Tallahassee, let me know, because I will put you to work, put you visiting offices quick. But it's a good thing to stay engaged and involved in. So we're going to talk about, real quickly, some of the legislative successes that we had. Now, again, I got brought in right at the proverbial eve of the Senate, of the session starting. So it was already bill drafting deadlines had already passed. And filing deadlines were coming right up. So we didn't have bills that we advocated as that we said, this is our bill, and we go out and you get a sponsor. I will also mention, just so you also know, House members are limited to 6 bills. They can file 6 bills in the House. Senators are unlimited. They can file as many bills as they want because, again, because we only have a 60-day session, and 3,000 bills get passed. It's really compact. So a lot of times people look at that and say, 60 days. That's way too quick to put together. Dealing with the 3rd largest state in the country. But I will say that it actually works, because if you look at the states like New Jersey is always in session. They are perpetually in session. They're in session every Monday and Thursday. So they are always there. Nothing really actually gets done because there is no pressure cooker. So they'll do something and then they'll undo it, and it's just a mess. So you look at Washington. Congress is always there. Like, Congress is perpetually in session. You don't hear a lot of things that are just the Congress is getting done. They don't get a lot done. Because the legislature knows that they're only there for 60 days, they're not going to be back again until March of 2025, things move. So in order to match up, we don't have time to do what the old how a bill becomes a law, that you heard about in school, where it's filed in the House, goes through the House, passes the House, goes over to the Senate, goes through the Senate, passes the Senate, goes to the governor. Not how it works. Because the committee meetings, again, they stop meeting fairly soon in the legislative process. So by halfway through, these committees, the subcommittees are done. So you have to really get these bills through. So you do not have time, if it's referred to 3 different committees, they have to be moving simultaneously. And they have to pass each chamber identically. So typically what happens is, you have to move them through the process together, and then this bill goes over, they match it up, they say, okay, our bill's now also on the calendar, it's the same, it's identical, pass it and send it to the governor. It's a whole process to work that through. So it's much easier, I will also mention, it is much easier to kill a bill than to pass a bill. But it is important for us, now that we're starting this a little bit earlier, certainly we together, the royal we, that we identify things that are things we would like to advocate for so that we can get a sponsor. And then, yes, maybe it has to become part of another bigger bill, amended onto a package, but it's something that we're working through, and we've gotten a House sponsor, we've gotten a Senate sponsor, and we're saying, it's fine to just stop things that are bad from happening, but there's also some things that we would like to see happen that are good, besides money in the budget, but also things that are policy issues. So when I talk about this and I say our successes were basically stopping things that would have been bad, but they did not pass. A few things obviously got through. We're working on veto letters, et cetera, now, but by the most part, it was, as Gene mentioned, successful because we stopped some things. So one of the first bills that you can go and you can look up is Senate Bill 738. The House companion was 789, but again, you don't have to know that was HB. 738 is the Senate bill. 789 is the House bill. Was environmental management, and it would entitle prevailing parties in cases against the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the water management districts, to recover costs and attorney's fees up to $50,000. So if it would have had an absolute chilling effect, nobody would have brought a case. I mean, it would have really limited, I'm going to say nobody, but it would have significantly eliminated us deciding, you know what, like recently, Nestle's pumping out way too much water out of our springs, we need to because if we lose, we're not only paying our attorney's fees, we're paying the prevailing party, we're going to be paying theirs. So it's like that's a risk we can't afford to take. So it's just one of these things that, again, it might sound like a subtle change, but it's a significant impact on the leveling of the playing field. It takes people like us and more grassroots organizations. We're not going to be able to fight some of these people that can just run. So they know that. So they're like, you know what? We're going to pass a bill that says if we win, not only you have to pay us attorney's fees. So that we were able to stop. A bill that we wanted to have pass was Senate Bill 32, House Bill 1581. It was the mangrove replanting and restoration. It moved quite through. When you go and you look at the process and you look at the history of this, it did move significantly through. And usually it does take about 3 years for an idea and a concept that we come together to actually pass something and make it into law. So I already know, I talk to her all the time, that Senator Garcia, who's from South Florida, and in a very sensitive area with Key Biscayne and in the Biscayne Bay area, she filed this bill. She's going to file it again, and it would require FDEP, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, to adopt rules for mangrove replanting and restoration to address erosion. It would have been in areas of critical state concern, like the Florida Keys. It talked about how it would protect barrier islands and spoil islands, and it supported Biscayne Bay revitalization efforts. In the House, this was being done by also South Florida legislators. A good friend of mine, because I went to high school in the Keys in Isla Mirada, and actually when I was in high school, and I graduated a long time ago in the 80s. It's quite a time to be in the Florida Keys in the 80s, if you remember Miami Vice. And I will tell you that I had a friend in high school. His dad was a DEA agent. We were all friends with another guy. We all knew his dad was a drug dealer. They would sit together at games and things on the weekend. And then again, it would be, okay, see ya, have a great day. See you Monday, I'll be chasing you again. All right? You can chase me again. Suns did great today in football, but it was that kind of craziness. And there's a legislator, Representative Mooney, again a Republican, but owns a business that was a family business that's been there forever, and it was the Trading Post in Isla Morada. And I would go after practices. On the way home, we would always stop at the Trading Post, and that's where we would drink a lot of Gatorade. And most of the time, we paid for all that Gatorade. But he owned that, and so we have a great relationship because of that. And so he wants to also support this again. Again, not being political, but it's just something that you need to know. The legislature right now, and it's cyclical, it ebbs and flows. But right now, and as it's been since 1996, the entire state government is Republican controlled, which means that there are many more Republicans in the Florida House than there are Democrats, and in the Florida Senate, and then the executive branch, the governor and the people that he appoints, DEP, et cetera, they're all Republicans. You can get a bill filed in the House by a Democrat. There's only a few of them, and you can get a bill. I mean, that's you can convince one of them, use one of your 6 bills to file something, and that's fine. You can get it filed, but unfortunately, it isn't going to get heard. It's not going to get heard. It is absolutely not going to pass. But the same exact thing you can give to a Republican, and it could go. So, like 2 years ago, I had a bill dealing with the intentional release of balloons. One of my clients, Oceana, balloon releases are a problem. So we worked with Surfrider Foundation and others, and we had a Republican in the House had the bill, but a Democrat in the Senate never moved. That exact same bill this year passed and is waiting to go to the governor, and so it will become the law of the land and it's a quirk in the law that basically said, regardless of the litter statute, so you had the litter statute over here, but it said, you are allowed to release up to 10 balloons within a 24-hour period, so you can release 9. 10, it becomes a problem. It's against the law. But you can release up to 9 balloons every 24 hours intentionally, not against the law. So we just decided, well, number one, we want to make the balloons part of the litter statute, so that it's the same penalty if you throw a potato chip bag out your window. That's litter. Releasing a balloon, which impacts cattle. So we even got the Cattlemen's Association. We even got Party City on board because they didn't want us to just outlaw balloons altogether. So we put together a whole coalition and got it passed. So we're number one, we put it in the litter statute, and then we also just eliminated that free 10 thing. So now a balloon is litter. So we passed that whole intentional release of balloon bill. But again, same bill. It just, because it was now a Republican that was doing it, she was from the beach, they decided, okay, well now this is like a good bill. A little side note to some of that is, it used to be that like in Miami-Dade County was very, very, very blue. Again, I don't care what your politics are, this is a reality. Very blue. So they didn't really care. The Republicans were like, we're not going to even deal with the tri-county, the tri-state, or the tri-county area, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach. But then, they started winning in these blue places. And so now all of a sudden, you have people like Garcia, Senator Garcia, who I mentioned, very coastal Miami Beach type area. But she's a Republican, and now they're like, we have to protect her. There was the one in Pinellas that filed the balloon bill. She used to be a St. Pete Beach commissioner. She represents all the beaches, Gulfport, Tierra Verde, that whole Pasadena area of St. Petersburg. And so now they're like, well, that's one of ours now, so we have to protect her, and she needs to have a good environmental bill. So there are ways that we can come up with ideas, and they're the right people. We can say, we want you to do this, and it can be done. We could think, oh my God, they'll never pass this. But in the right way, with the right people, we can do it. That bill made it very far in the process, did not pass. It would also study the feasibility of using mangoes for flood protection to reduce insurance premiums. It's a good plant bill, and that is one that it will be back next year, and we'll be able to pass that, I think, next year. Another one that died was to allow local government coastal protections. It started off as a good bill. It allowed coastal counties to use Resilient Florida grant funds to conduct saltwater intrusion vulnerability assessments, and it required DEP to update the statewide flood vulnerability and sea level rise data to make all data and info available to the public. However, as it moved through the process, in order for this one senator who was the sponsor, she was told by a chairman who represents an area in the Sarasota area, I need you to put in this language that would have helped a particular development area. And I remember we would have our calls, and it would be me and Jean and Valerie and Linda, and we would have these discussions, and I would say, we need to support this bill, because it started off, it was a good bill. It was a bill we wanted to pass. And then all of a sudden, we had to be very nimble, because then all of a sudden, it then became a bill that we did not want to pass. So then we had to at least stop putting out things to tell you guys, because you would have done it. Yeah. House Bill 298 or Senate Bill 298. So you've got a great team, great communications team. We were able to put a stop to the ask. I got with the sponsors, and we worked through some things. And at the very end, we actually got that language taken out. And we were successful in getting it taken out, but the bill, it was too late. The bill did not pass. But I feel good about the fact that we showed our muscle. There's some people that paid attention to that and said now they know next year when they start it off, they're going to be like, we don't want to start this off with the bad stuff in it, because this thing was moving right along. The minute the bad stuff got in it, it kind of stopped. Then it went back to moving along, even though it got late and the game ended before it passed. We'll be able to use that to, I think, be able to do, again, that'll be a good bill. We stopped it because it was bad. It had a bad piece in it and was not worth passing, some good policy for a bad piece. The other thing that's an issue is in the state of Florida, the governor, she or he, now it's a he, someday it'll be a she, they only have line item veto on one thing, and that's the budget. That's the only bill that's passed by the legislature. They can go in and say, I don't like this, I don't like that. So you have to be careful, because all the other groups also know, that are trying to pass things, that it's an all or nothing thing. So if they'd pass something with a poison pill in it, as Jean called it, we would be, it would be one of these things where, but 99% of it's good. Yeah, well, so is rat poison. 99% of rat poison is cornmeal. It's that 1% that's going to kill the rat. So we had to make a decision on that, and we did. Another bill that was just a disaster is this Senate Bill 664, House Bill 527. It was a land and water management bill that would require local government wetland buffer zones to comply with DEP on water management delineations, or local governments would have to buy these buffer zones. It preempted the regulation of dredge and fill activities to the state. So if you always hear, you'll go to some town hall meetings or delegation meetings or whatever, and you're going to hear, local control, local government is best. The people, know, but that's not what they really think, because they want the state to be the ones that, so they preempt everything to the state. Preemption would be fine if that meant the state would do something. But like the bagged study that we would take, I would be fine if there was a statewide policy. But that, you think of like vacation rentals. It doesn't mean we're gonna give it to the state and the state's gonna regulate it. We're gonna preempt it to the state just so that nobody's regulating it, because the local governments aren't gonna do it, so be able to do it. So these preemptions, not good. It would repeal land management review process. It again could be one of these things that very easily could absorb one of these preemptions on urban fertilizer regulations, all of these types of things that none of us wanted. And it was a really bad bill last year. And Gina and I talked, we're like, this bill got nowhere last year. These people learned their lesson. I mean, these senators, from the greater Tampa Bay area, they won't try this again. But sure enough, they did not learn their lesson. They did it. We had some conversations with the chairs, and it never moved. And this is one of those where I again said it's easier to kill a bill than to pass a bill, because let's say there's 9 weeks of session, and if there's only, even with committee weeks, let's say there's a total of 8 weeks where they could actually even hear bills in committee, and it's got to make it three committees. If you literally just tell a chairman, don't hear it this week, then you go in the next week. You don't want to hear that, it's not ready. Don't hear it this week. If you really keep it from being heard about 2 times, 3 times, then it's not going to make it through. And then the House is looking to see, are the Senate bills moving? We don't want to waste our time, because we don't have much. We don't want to waste our time moving a bill if it's not going to move in the Senate. So then you play the game of, I don't know what's wrong with the Senate. I don't know why they're not moving that bill. Meanwhile, we're saying, don't hear that bill. So it's a matter of making, so you just make sure that it doesn't move, and you can again, kill a bill easily. The surplus lands bill, I think, was another big victory that we had. This bill, Senate Bill 1620, would have allowed DEP to sell surplus conservation lands without development rights if it was within the Florida Wildlife Corridor. This is a whole bunch of stuff that not good, and it needs to be studied better before. I know that there are parcels of land, because of the way land acquisition works in the state of Florida, where when it's a willing seller. We're not imminently domain. It's not an eminent domain situation. It's a willing seller that the state buys either the land, fee simple, owns it, the whole thing, or they get conservation easements like the Rural and Family Lands Program. So I'm sure that there are big parcels of, say, the Florida Wildlife Corridor that we bought as a state that there's pieces of that we might that aren't necessary maybe to have conserve. I'm not naive enough to think that that's not the case. But the way this did not set up the right kind of process to make sure that was the case, and it would have, and I think it allowed significant development to encroach upon a corridor where we're spending, it'll end up billions of dollars to save land, from development. I mean, we are in a race against us in development, and I will tell. I mean, the last crop that's ever grown on a family farm are rooftops. And once the family farm gets sold for more houses, we're not getting that land. I mean, that land's not coming back, and it's going to be a problem for other things. So we made sure. So there was an attempt, because this bill did not have a House companion. So they were going to take this language and they drafted an amendment to put this into the agriculture, the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services package. Big, huge package. Which, by the way, which we've read about, not only is passed, but is signed into law by the governor. It's the bill that outlaws cultivated meat, even though we don't have a cultivated meat operation yet. It's a whole thing. It does a lot of stuff that's not great. There is a piece in there that I got to look on dealing with saw palmettos that I think isn't bad. and it is now, it has been signed by the governor, and we need to look at that, 1804. But this bad surplus language was going to go on to that bill, and I knew that that bill was going to pass because it was a department package, widespread support. And so we made sure that that bill also, we had the votes in committee to keep that from happening. Again, the emails that went out, I will tell you, Gene writes a really good letter. I mean, he's like the AI of, like, it's like asking, right, it's like saying, write a letter, AI, that has to do, and he like chat GPT, whatever the kids are doing today, and it comes out accurate and good. And then Valerie does an amazing job of making sure all of the chapters, all of the people, everybody gets it, and you guys do things with it. Because on this bill, I went into a meeting with a senator and to talk about this. They're on the committee, and I got handed Gene's letter. The committee staff had it, the senator had it, his staff had it, the Ag and Department of Ag and Consumer Services, their staff had it. They're all in there with their Gene letter, and I'm seeing like the logo, and I'm like, huh, well that's our letter. That's us. So it was, and so they were like, well, it laid out an argument that they could not, and they were like, well, we're not going to do this. So that worked out great. We were able to kill that. Here, actually, I do have part of the letter right here. It was to Senator Brodeur, the chair of the committee, and it was a very good letter. So Gene's great. So another bill that we would like to have had passed, 1187, House Bill. Senate Bill 1258, it dealt with carbon sequestration, and it would have created a carbon sequestration task force in DEP and requires that there would have been reports to DEP and the governor and the cabinet. It would identify and inventory natural and agricultural lands capable of sequestering carbon, consider methods to increase. It would have started a discussion that needs to start happening also with ag land. There's a lot of carbon in cattle production and cattle land. And so it passed a committee. It was a representative from the St. Petersburg area did it. Again, this was one of those that I think fell victim to what I said. If you have a Democratic sponsor, I think they gave her a committee hearing, knowing full well we're not going any further. So that one is a bill that I'd like to see us get back. And I think if we had the right kind of sponsor, and these Democrats know, they know, maybe we prime co-sponsor it kind of thing, so the name isn't, and someday I'd hope I don't like that, but that's just where we are. In order to be pragmatic and get things done, that's what we need to do. So that one will come back. One that did not pass, that we talked about, and we won't have to go into it, was the regulation of the auxiliary containers, preempting again that to the state. Bags, cups, bottles, cans, styrofoam, all kinds of stuff, not good. And it would have been retroactive, so even the state parks now that don't, and all of the local ordinances that are on the books already would have gone away in a flash. It would have been, those ordinances are not enforceable anymore. So that would have been that's a problem. Killed that, which I think is great. An Everglades protection area, Senate Bill 1364. This also did not pass, but got close. But it requires that proposed comp plans and plan amendments that apply to lands within or within 2 miles of the Everglades protection area must follow the state coordinated review process. It required DEP to determine whether plans or plan amendments adversely impact the Everglades protection area or Everglades restoration. Must identify strategies to mitigate adverse impacts, which would have been, again, I think some of the mangrove work would have also helped there. Local governments must include mitigation strategies before adopting comp plan amendments. This was supported by the Miami-Dade and Broward Native Plant Society chapters, and then it made it to the last one more Senate committee And then they ran out of time because they're limited. 3,000 bills are filed, usually about 10% pass, so only about 300 bills a year pass. This was, again, not one that did it. And then lastly, there was a bad bill that dealt, a Senate Bill 1772, House Bill 1075, that dealt with the soil and water conservation districts. And it would have essentially, it would have consolidated a bunch, and it would have just eliminated a bunch, and it would have dissolved 49 of the state's soil and water conservation districts, and then transferred all of their assets to FDACS, which is the Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Services. It was a bad bill that, again, we all identified as this. There might be some that could stand to be consolidated, maybe that aren't, but these are districts where the voters put those commissioners in. They run for office, and they do educational work, and they do a lot of work that I think is vital and important to certainly with our mission, and to just dissolve them all and say, oh, this is government, a branch of, because again, some developers or some people just don't want to be bothered by them because they can get up and put a stop to some things they're trying to do. So that bill, which was strongly opposed by some of the soil and water conservation districts, obviously, because they would have just been dissolved, we were able to stop. And I got with the sponsor and the lobbyists that were running that bill in favor of it, and I said, look, let's get together, let's try to work something out. Maybe there are some that we can consolidate or do something, but just to get rid of all of them is no good. And they said, well, we don't think we really have to negotiate with you. We're going to pass this. And so I said, all right, well, that's your call. Fine. And then they were not successful in passing it because, again, I'll negotiate with you if you want to have a conversation, and I will try to find some middle ground. But to just say, well, you're just the Florida Native Plant Society, we don't need to, that's just not acceptable. So it was moving through the House, and I went over to the Senate, and I said, I don't like it, and they're not willing to talk. I wish I could come to you with a proposal that we all worked on and agreed, because the legislature also does not like food fights. They want the groups to get together, and whether it's the trial lawyers and the doctors with medical malpractice or whatever it is, they want to make sure that the groups have gotten together, work something out, then they bring it to the legislature, and the legislature can put their blessing on it and pass the worked out deal. So they didn't do that. The election, it's now you're going to be, you're going to be hearing from these people like you've never heard from them before, because all House members, again, they have to run every 2 years. So your House member will be running for office and will show up at things that you were like, well, I haven't seen you in 2 years, and here you are again. It's important for you to say, not only am I a constituent of yours, but I'm with the Florida Native Plant Society. You can drop my name because they know who I am, but you can say, look, we would like for to work with you. We'd love to be able to get with you and discuss some of our priorities, et cetera. And then what we'll do after the election, we'll set up, I really want to set up so we can do some of these legislative visits, or if you guys meet monthly, Madam President, and this will be certainly with Cindy and up to you guys if this is what you want, but we'll get them here so that you guys can talk to them and ask questions, and they can understand who you are and all of that. Because right now, and during the election season, they'll go, if there's where 2 or 3 of you are gathered together in good fellowship and your voters, they're gonna show up, especially if you have the food. So keep that in mind, and I think that's something that we can do all over, certainly the state. We did end up, the last thing I'll mention is with a budget item. Budget has not yet gone to the governor. I don't think that it'll be a problem because of the way it got funded through a state agency, but the dollars, and Gina, I'm drawing a blank on the name. It was $278,000 or I think is what it had been. I think it was 277,000 this year. 217.
Endangered Plant Research Grant.
The Endangered Plant Research Grant, which, and I want to figure out a way, because we lobbied for that money. We helped get it in the budget. We have relationships going forward of people that are going to be like the appropriations chair that we are very, 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 very close to, extremely close to. We can get that increased, and but the organizations that we don't get the money. No Florida Native Plant Society chapter, like we don't get any of that money. That money goes to the Archibald and other research facilities and places that are great and do great work, but I want them to know that we're the ones that help get them their money, and then I think that they also need to advocate for themselves a little bit on what they're doing for that money, because eventually it comes down to where at some point with term limits, people lose. You know, it used to be you could say the same person was going to be there for 20 years, and you funded it last year, Chairman. Oh, okay, sure. Now it's going to be like, yeah, I don't know. I've never heard of that. Like, what do they do? What do they use the money for? So we want to be able to. We need to be able to advocate properly for what it's for, and those that are getting the money need to be able to talk to. So I know that's a lot of information. You now know more about the legislature than I guarantee you 99% of the people in Hernando County. But do you have any questions? Anything else? All right. Thank you.